can declare that the Supreme Court has unanimously ruled that the use of the terms women and sex in UK law under the Equality Act 2010 refers to biological sex.
Yes, this of course follows a long-running legal battle between the Scottish Government and the campaign group for Women Scotland. Now, the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, has welcomed the ruling.
Sex has always meant biological sex, and what we have seen is a lot of people misinterpreting the law. They've had guidelines from all sorts of organisations that actually do not follow the law. So I really welcome this judgment.
Well, joining us now is the Independent Member of Parliament for Canterbury, Rosie Duffield. Now, Rosie, of course, you were elected as a Labour MP originally. Was part of the reason you defected to sit as an independent issues around sex and gender that you just sat so differently from the front bench of the Labour Party on?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly taken its toll being a member of the Labour Party and being briefed against constantly and kind of dismissed publicly for the last sort of 7 years. And that was definitely a part of what made me make my decision.
So how do you feel now? Because it seems as though the Labour Party are, well, I wouldn't say celebrating this ruling, but they're, acknowledging it as fact and almost as if it's always been this way, Rosie, has it?
Yeah, there's an awful lot of sort of backpedalling and, you could call it soft gaslighting, people pretending that they always believe things, just generally since this government have taken into power, changing the way they speak about Donald Trump and changing everything they've ever stood for. And this is probably going to be treated in exactly the same way, people pretending that I wasn't ever hounded out. And in fact, the people that were part of trying to hound me out are now ensconced in number 10 and, in the NEC of the Labour Party. So facts are facts, and I'm not going to start pretending otherwise.
And yet there has been, of course, a move from some figures within this government that almost preempted this ruling, or at least have been commensurate with the law as this ruling have found it to be. So Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, early on, I think it was in the first couple of months that he was Health Secretary, he made a decision on single-sex wards in hospitals in England, and that was based on sex rather than gender. I mean, that fits with this ruling. Is this ruling all that different from what the government has been behaving like?
Well, Wes has always been an ally in this. And, of course, a year ago we had the Cass review and he was fully supportive of the findings of Hilary Cass from day one and has always been respectful of that. He's always listened to me personally and has had deep concerns about the way that some, like Kemi just mentioned, were misinterpreting the law.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of politicians who were sensing the mood music was changing for rather a long time, and it will be nice that people like the Prime Minister and others who have been asked that question, what is a woman, will now be able to answer it with some conviction, presumably, because now the law once again backs them up with being able to say a biological woman.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, well, hang on. Do you think that actually changes, because this is about the definition of the word woman in the Equality Act?
This allows them. I believe this will allow them to be more. It would say it with more conviction, Rosie, and not get jumbled up in their thought process.
Yeah, exactly. Things like, I think Keir Starmer said 99% of women don't have a penis. I mean, he's going to have to try and clarify that now, I think.
Oh, God, we're going to go round and round again, aren't we? But, Rosie, just lastly, how do you... Because we've been debating a little bit about how much this will actually impact women, how much this will change things. In your view, how will this change the picture? Because for me, it's just a recognition of what is true, of fact. Yeah. But how will this impact women in their day-to-day life, potentially?
I think, the use of terms like, biological terms for mother and breastfeeding, and when lesbians want to meet together with just other women, that will all have real different, an actual effect. So I know a couple of lesbian groups that can't meet in public without men coming in and sort of opting into their spaces. But hopefully now that will now end.
OK, well, Rosie Duffield, thank you very much indeed. You're the Independent MP for Canterbury. I've been speaking about these issues for rather a long time.
Have you been getting a load of spam in your email recently? What about random calls? It's really annoying, isn't it? Data brokers are out there collecting your personal information. Anything from your email, your full name, your address, and even your political affiliation. Cyber criminals can even use AI to mimic the voices of friends and family to trick people into sending them money. And it gets even worse. People out there are getting huge loans taken out in their names without even knowing about it. But don't worry, because the sponsor of this video, Incogni, can help. They reach out to the data brokers on your behalf and request that your information is removed from their databases. Incogni continues to make sure that your data is removed automatically from the internet via repeated removal requests. So, how can you get started? Well, step 1, hit the link in the description. Create an Incogni account and tell us whose data you'd like removed. Step 2, grant Incogni the right to work on your behalf. Step 3, sit back, relax, and watch Incogni work. They will update consistently so you know when your data has been removed. Incogni is risk-free for 30 days, so you can try it for yourself and you'll get a free refund if the service isn't for you. So take back your personal data today with Incogni. Use the code GBNews using the link in the description below and you'll get 60% off an annual payment plan.
OK, well, we're joined by Conservative peer Baroness Anne Jenkin. Thank you very much indeed. So what do you make of the reaction to some of this? Because there's been quite overwhelming support for this ruling, but some charity groups, for example, Amnesty, have said that this ruling is disappointing. It has potentially concerning consequences for trans people. And also Stonewall as well has come out and said they're very worried about this. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm on the side of the women, of biological women, who've been campaigning for a long time to get this result. And I would like to thank you on GB News for covering this so extensively. If you were a reader of The Guardian or a watcher of the BBC, you would hardly have known that this issue was in contention over the last few months and years. So thank you to you and thank you to the judiciary who've, it sounds completely bonkers that we've wasted so much time and money for them to have to come to this, what seems like a very obvious conclusion. When it comes to the campaign groups you mentioned, trans people are going to still be protected in law as all the other protected characteristics under the Equality Act. It's just clarified for those who have been misinterpreting the law that women's single-sex spaces are now protected and women, as most people understand it to be and would appear to be common sense, are indeed biologically women are now, all that situation is clarified.
Given that this is, as you say, a clarification of what most people interpreted the Equality Act to say anyway, will all that much actually change? Because, of course, we have seen the government talk about, for example, single-sex wards in hospitals. We've seen some sports change their attitude as well. But ultimately, it's not necessarily that the Supreme Court is saying one way or the other. Sort of private enterprise can choose.
I think the problem's really been that we have two different bits of legislation, as I'm sure you're aware, Tom, that the Gender Recognition Act, which was passed in 2004, created this muddle that they enabled men to have gender recognition certificates, which meant that they could change their birth certificate. And then the campaign groups, therefore, were able to muddy the water. And if you're, a Saturday girl in Marks and Spencer and a bloke turns up and wants to try on bras in the women's changing rooms, they just don't know enough about it, and they were confused and didn't feel that they could reject that. And it's been the same, as you say, in hospital wards. But common sense has now come through. We've wasted a lot of money, a lot of time, and I'm extremely grateful, as a lot of people will be, to the women that you're watching on your screens now, to the campaign groups who've put themselves through hell to do this. It's been a long, difficult journey. They've had to raise all the money for it, but they have kept strong. And these three women in Scotland, these three amazing women, deserve enormous thanks from all the rest of us for exposing the incoherence in the Scottish Government's position and the SNP's position. But it has been clarified, and I think that most people will be extremely relieved to hear it.
And to you as well. Now, Tom, of course, it is right that there has been a sort of change in the way of thinking that around some single-sex spaces and around, making sure that women's rights are protected in what politicians are saying and how these things are implemented. But it doesn't take that long to sort of remember where we were only a couple of years ago and a few years ago. This was a very hard battle. At one point, you were a pariah. People were losing their jobs over this issue because they were called transphobic just for stating that they didn't believe gender and sex were the same thing, or just for stating that a trans woman is a woman. And that sort of... Oh, sorry, Baroness Anne. But yes, it does. We've come a long way with this. Do you think this will put the issue to bed a little, or do you think we're going to see these battles run over and over?
Well, I'm sure there will be much more legal discussion going on, and the lawyers in Parliament and elsewhere will be debating the ins and outs of it. We have got to sort out, there may be some legal clarification now in Parliament of the Equality Act. The Conservative Party did intend to put that, if we won the election, to sort out what... Indeed, the judges have now said in the Equality Act, if we had won it, to define women as biological women. But yes, it's interesting that the days of #no debate and for the women #be kind are well and truly over. But it has taken a few very brave women who've been prepared to put their heads above the parapet. And I think you've had most of them on talking to you today, but they have been cancelled, but at the same time, they've been heroes to the many women who have felt unable to speak out for themselves, but they've watched these women do so for us. And as I say, particularly the 4 Women Scotland and J.K. Rowling and all the rest of them.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Still trying to get J.K. Rowling on the channel, but perhaps one day. Baroness Anne Jenkin, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time this afternoon.